Dear colleagues, I'm glad to have another cup of tea with you. Today, I will share with you how to present grammar using guided discovery method. I will use materials from the course book for the 7th grade, Unit 3, Lesson 3A, pages 34 and 35. While watching the demo lesson, please pay attention how I elicited the meaning and function of the grammatical structure. After the lesson, we will get together again and discuss it with you. Let's go to the class with me. Hello, dear friends. I'm glad to see you again. Hope you are all great. Let's start our lesson. Last time we were talking about teenagers' addiction. We read an online discussion about Typhoon's problem. Today, we are going to role-play the online discussion. Let's remember who took part in an online discussion. Typhoon, Beauty, Boss, Super Sweet. So, we are going to have groups of 4 students. Every student will have his or her own role card. You decide which role do you want within your group. I'll give you 5 minutes to read and remember what your character said so you are able to role-play. Then you rehearse in your small groups and prepare for acting. As soon as you are ready, you will perform in front of the class. After having seen all groups' performance, we will vote whose acting was the best. Are you going to write anything? No. Are you going to act? Yes. Can you choose the role card? Yes. You decided within your groups. Will you act in front of the class? Yes. How are we going to define the best group? By voting, right? Let's remember the online discussion. What is Typhoon's addiction? Right, his laptop and mobile phone. What does Beauty advise him to do? What does she say? Right, you ought to be careful while using the internet day and night. If she says you ought to, does it mean it's a good idea to be careful? Yes. Repeat after me, please. You ought to be careful while using the internet day and night. You ought to be careful while using the internet day and night. Thank you. What else does she advise? You should talk to your parents, right? If she says you should, does it also mean it's a good idea to do? Yes, it is. Repeat after me, please. You should talk to your parents. You should talk to your parents. You should talk to your parents. Right. What is the formula for ought to and should? Right. Ought to plus verb, should plus verb. And we use ought to, should to talk about something that we think is a good idea to do. What does Beauty advise not to do? What does she say? Right, she says you shouldn't waste your time doing nothing. Right. If you say ought not to or shouldn't, does it mean it's a good idea to do something? No. Does it mean it's a bad idea to do something? Yes. Please repeat after me. You ought not to give up your favorite hobby. You ought not to give up your favorite hobby. Right. Let's repeat Beauty's advice. You shouldn't waste your time doing nothing. Once more. You shouldn't waste time doing nothing. Thank you. What is the formula for negative sentence? Ought not to plus verb. Should not plus verb. Short form, oughtn't to plus verb, shouldn't to plus verb. And we use negative form to say that something is a bad idea to do. And lastly, how to ask whether it is a good or bad idea to do something. Right. So he should question. Should he be careful with his parents while using the internet day and night? Good. And the answer is yes, he should, or no, he shouldn't. Repeat after me. Should he be careful with his parents while using the internet day and night? Should he be careful while using the internet day and night? Good. What about the ought to talk to his parents? He ought to question. Right. Ought he to talk to his parents? And the answer is yes, he ought. No, he oughtn't. Let's repeat together. Ought he to talk to his parents? Ought he to talk to his parents? Good. And the formula for the question form is should plus subject plus verb, or ought plus subject plus to plus verb. And our grammar topic is should. Could you please copy it in your notebooks? Now, please read the rules and match the rules to the sentences. It's a good idea to do something. It's not a good idea to do something. Let's check together. It's a good idea to do something. A. It's not a good idea to do something. B. Now, write the pattern for negative forms. Should plus verb, it's a positive form. What about the negative form? Right. Negative form for should, it's shouldn't plus verb. Ought to, ought not to plus verb. Please complete the sentences with should or shouldn't. For example, we should take care of the environment. What about the rest of the sentences? Let's check the answers. Teenagers shouldn't waste their time in front of computers. Should we go jogging now? You should do your homework in order to be a good student. I have a toothache. You should visit a dentist. He shouldn't talk too much during the classes. Please rewrite the sentences using ought to or ought not to. For example, we ought to take care of the environment. What about the rest of the sentences? Let's check the answers. We ought to take care of the environment. Teenagers ought not to waste their time in front of the computers. Ought we to go jogging now? You ought to do your homework in order to be a good student. I have a toothache. You ought to visit a dentist. He ought not to talk too much during the classes. Please give advice using should, shouldn't, or ought to, ought not to. For example, I'm often late for school. You should wake up early to go to school. What about the rest of the sentences? Let's compare the ideas together. I'm often late for school. You should wake up early to go to school. Some of my classmates get very bad marks at school. They should study harder. I need to learn English much faster. You should practice more. The territory of our school is dirty. You should clean up the territory of your school. I'm bored when I have a lot of free time. You should have a hobby. Now we are going to play What is my problem game. I have prepared some sentences with imaginary students. One student sits in front of the class. I will stick a stick note with problem on his or her forehead. The student won't see the problem. The rest of the students will give him some advice and student should guess the problem. For example, my problem is I cannot sleep at night. It's on a stick note here, which is on my forehead, and I don't know what is the problem. I listen to the suggestions and try to guess. Suggestions may be the following. You shouldn't watch TV before you go to bed. Or you shouldn't eat much before you go to bed. And as soon as I guess, the next student comes in front of the class and continues the game. Okay, if I have a stick note on my forehead, can I look at it and read? Of course not. Do I listen to advice of my classmates? Yes. Do I have to guess my problem? Yes. If I guess the problem, will the other student continue the game? Yes. Well done. Now, please write 4 problems you or the people you know have. For example, I'm always late. Now, please work in groups of 3. Use the useful phrases below for asking for advice and giving advice. Share advice with one another. For example, what should I do if I'm always late? And advice might be, I think you should get up earlier. This is the end of the lesson. Thank you for being active, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye. Now, let's discuss our mini lesson. Do you remember how I started my lesson? You are right. I drew students' attention to the previous lesson and elicited the topic teenagers' addiction and the content of the text. Then I divided students into groups and had a role-play activity with them. I used this activity to make sure that students remember the information about the text, and students seemed to enjoy role-playing. Later, I used this information to build up a context for grammar presentation. I presented should, ought to for giving advice. The text that students read at the last lesson helped me to elicit the meaning and the function of the grammatical structure. We talked about advice the teenagers gave Typhoon, what he should and shouldn't do. You may have noticed that I always asked students first and then gave the answer. Why? Teachers should always try to elicit the information from students because they already have some background knowledge and they can help teachers to build up a context, how and when grammar is used. Teachers are like guides who lead them by asking questions, and it allows students to work more independently. That's why this method is called guided discovery method. Students discover being guided and helped by teachers. Then I asked comprehension check questions like, if she says you ought to play sports, does it mean it's a bad idea to do? And the answer was no. If she says you ought to play sports, does it mean it's a good idea? And the answer was yes. To make sure that all students know how and when to use this grammar. After asking comprehension check questions, I also asked them to repeat the sentences several times so that students can pronounce them correctly. I elicit the sentences, the formula, and how and when grammar is used, and write on the board because I want to guide them and allow them to discover. Teacher's role is a guide at every stage of grammar presentation. When the presentation is over, students should copy sentences in their copybooks, so coming back home from school, they have their notes to refer to while doing their homework. Students also had some exercises to practice. They used should, ought to, shouldn't, ought not to in the sentences, and these helped them to practice new grammar. So you can see that today I wanted to present grammar using guided discovery method. I hope that you enjoyed both the lesson and the discussion, and you will use this method in your class. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.